And you also learn the value of training, which is something that's very close to your heart and mine. That if you've seen a situation, albeit that you think you may never need to see it again in a simulated environment, or in our case, twice a year for two days in the simulator, it teaches you that actually preparation is everything, because it builds. If you have then, as you said, the unknown comes at you. You're mid-Atlantic, you have a fuel leak, which is something I had. What do you do next? Question mark. And the answer is you. Welcome to the Sixsess Consultancy's Just Great People podcast, the podcast that introduces you to ordinary people who've done extraordinary things. My name is Barry Eustance, and I'd like to introduce you to today's guest. Hi, everybody. It's Barry Eustance here from the Sixsess Consultancy Just Great People podcast. You may remember a few months back, we had Paddy Nolan. Paddy is a performance coach and works with some of the biggest brands you've heard of, particularly in the luxury sector. However, on this occasion, when we set up to organize this podcast not that long ago, Paddy said, can I ask the questions of you? And that seemed like a perfectly reasonable request. So I will now hand over to Paddy and sit back and watch what happens next. And we'll attempt to answer his very probing questions of me. So Paddy, over to you. Welcome to the Just Great People podcast.
Thank you. And hello, everybody. I think like Barry said, there was a sense of curiosity that I had after our last session, and also from listening to the other great guests that Barry has interviewed. So really I had said to Barry, let's flip the script and hear your story, which I think listeners and viewers will also find very insightful, and also from my own curiosity. So I think maybe to hear a little bit more about you in terms of, I know you had mentioned you were born in Bahrain, you've spent time internationally. To tell us a little bit more about that, please.
Yeah, well, it started, my father was, when he was demobbed in the late 40s, went over to Bahrain, and they'd found oil there. The first oil in the Gulf was found in Bahrain, I think it was in 1933. But on my 5th birthday, flew back from Bahrain and went on the flight deck of a Comet. And I was a member by that stage of the Junior Jet Club. Those who flew BOAC may remember it. And I went on the flight deck, and the captain very kindly put me in his seat and then asked me what I wanted to do as a career. And I said, I want to be a pilot, sir. And that is how the story started. And that was pretty well my focus from that point until 2022, when I stopped flying due great old age.
Okay. So the from that first introduction in the cockpit, you had very clearly known that this is what you would like to do, was to into the world of aviation.
Yeah, absolutely. And it went on for 60 years. Actually, it's just dawned on me that is exactly the case. So, and it was a very focused thing. At school, I did the subjects that some guys who had gone to the College of Air Training at Hamble had done. So I knew that those subjects worked. I got my medical done when I was in my very early teens. So it was all focused. I joined the Air Cadets. I got a flying scholarship, which was like gold. The Royal Air Force taught me to fly. And from that point onwards, I was committed.
Wow, brilliant. And what was the skills you picked up or learned throughout your career as a pilot and in the world of aviation that still stand to you?
Well, yeah, I think it's, first of all, you've got to have passion. You've got to be determined. You've got to be persistent. You've got to have a clear vision and a focus and objective and a goal with objectives along the way. And you've got to be pretty single-minded, I think, if you're going to do well in almost anything. Well, in everything, frankly, even those people who appear to have happened upon great success in whatever endeavor they've intended to do, have almost all, in my experience, been the result of tenacity, determination, never quitting. That's not to say not pivoting. I'm a great believer in build, measure, learn, pivot, or as Nick Himovitz said the other day, learn, build, measure, and pivot. Also, really, integrity is very, very important to me. The trait of integrity is very important, and ethics very important. Basically, airplanes are like children; they tend not to lie. They tend to focus on the reality of the moment and potentially the reality of the future. And so you realize at a very early age that you're part of a team. You have to be part of a team. Every airplane that flies has got a team behind it, the engineering team, the air traffic control team, whether it's a two-seat training aircraft or whether it's a 308-seat passenger aircraft with 18 or 13 crew. There's a huge amount of teamwork. So it teaches you discipline, integrity, ethics, persistence. And you also learn the value of training, which is something that's very close to your heart and mind. That if you've seen a situation, albeit that you think you may never need to see it again in a simulated environment, or in our case, twice a year for two days of ritual humiliation in the simulator, which is usually erased like a bad dream after you walk out. It teaches you that actually preparation is everything. And the ability then, because it builds, if you have then, as you said, the unknown comes at you. You're mid-Atlantic, you have a fuel leak, which is something I had. What do you do next? Question mark. And the answer is you sit back from it for a while, you analyze it, you engage the team, you sit upon all the great learnings of all the great teachers who have provided you with a key understanding of what the baseline is, and you build out from there. So when you got the basics fixed, you can then be pretty creative, innovative, and respond to almost anything that comes at you.
Yeah, no, it sounds like the amount that was learned through those years, and I think that's what I was fascinated to discover more about. And it reminded me, like you were sharing there, related to the time you spend preparing for any eventuality. And I seen something recently where I think it was Captain Sully Sullenberger on the Hudson, and he had said something like, you spend all these hours in the simulator preparing for these things, and they're deposits in an account that you may never, will use or may never use, but in that moment, all of the preparation comes to fruition. And when you were over the ocean, you said an oil leak, I think you said,
it was a fuel leak. Yes, it was
Fuel
slightly
leak,
annoying.
yeah.
It was one of those things you really could do without mid-Atlantic. It's coming back from Chicago. Yeah, and did you want me to expand on that? I mean, basically,
Yeah.
we were coming back from Chicago, and the airplane has fuel tanks, and one of them was leaking. And the thing is, which one? And how do you spot the leak? And the leak was actually spotted through some fairly fundamental arithmetic, calculator and a pen on a pilot's log. And so we then set about following the procedure. But at that point, and this is where Sully was entirely correct. In fact, although you're putting all this training into a deposit account, it pays interest the whole time. It's never wasted. And on the time that you may need to make a withdrawal, all the rest that's still in there that hasn't been used is still accruing interest. So it became rather like a simulator exercise. We spoke to the crew, we spoke to our engineering team, we spoke to air traffic. Everybody knew what was going on. We had options. Were we going to go to Shannon? And if we continued beyond Shannon, were we going to go somewhere else on the way to Heathrow? What was the situation as it was accruing? And in the event, we shut an engine down as part of the overall fuel leak procedure. To be fair, it was about 4 o'clock in the morning. I mean, it's not when you're necessarily sitting at your best, but that's how it goes with long haul flying. And we shut an engine down. The leak appeared to stop. All the basic arithmetic confirmed that. And we continued in an orderly fashion to London Heathrow with options all the way away in Shannon, Cardiff, Brize Norton, etc. as an alternative. And in fact, the passengers barely noticed. In fact, they didn't notice. They were served croissant and coffee quite normally as we continued into Heathrow on 3 engines rather than 4, which is one of the great advantages of flying with a 4-engine airplane.
I'm fascinated by those types of situations with the preparation that prepares you for handling something like that. And you will never hear or know about those situations because it's been done in the background without anyone knowing while they enjoy their coffee. And I was curious what you discovered or picked up in the process through your career related to communication, and communication as the captain of the plane that you're flying in that moment.
And well, it wasn't just the flying element. When you're operating with a crew of 13 or 18 or however many it is, it's an entire team that needs to be managed and interacted with, all the way down to, for example, Sydney, where we'd go to Hong Kong for 2 nights, and then we'd go to Sydney for 24 hours, and then we'd come back to Hong Kong for 2 nights. And all sorts of things happen. People get ill, people get unhappy, things happen to them at home, and all that has to be managed. And yet at showtime, they need to be absolutely on the game, absolutely on the ball, completely disciplined, and coordinated as a team. And I can't overstress the importance of training in all of this. Training, and also the thing that is really important in the airline industry, which I discussed with Tim Miller in the podcast we did, which was CRM, crew resource management, which came out, basically, it was evolved out of some pretty horrendous accidents in the airline sector back in the 70s and 80s. And it was about using all of the attributes of the team that anybody can call the captain and say, listen, I think something is wrong. There's a time and place. Obviously, hurtling down the runway at 160 knots is the wrong time to take a call from the back galley saying that they think that there's a problem. But there is a protocol actually for that to happen. They can get that information to the flight deck once you're outside of the critical areas of operation. So pretty timely, but there's a time and a place. And just approaching decision speed at Heathrow on a lousy day, or worse, Kennedy, is not the time you want to necessarily get that information. But once you're in the climb and climbing out, that's a pretty good time. So it was all about everybody can contribute. Although there is a rank, a hierarchy, leadership isn't positional. It's actually something that occurs result of establishing a team where mutual respect works. And that actually, the importance of the most junior, and I use the word cautiously, person in that team, their input is as important as the most senior and can save the day, and has. And so crew resource management is all about doing that, and it's all about teamwork and bonding. So it's a particular thing in the airline industry, but I think sadly it very often seems to stop at the airplane. You then go to the administrative environments within airlines, and then that might not happen. You have the silo type mentality which can occur. And so I'm a great believer in breaking down silos and actually getting the best thoughts, the best ideas, the best innovation from wherever it comes from, and inspiring and encouraging leadership from everybody.
I love that. And like The Leader with No Title, I think is a book by Robin Sharma, and like tapping into that rookie smart, the idea that the most junior person can sometimes see things that others may not see. And I can think of many roles where that type of information would make a big difference, especially if they spot some malfunction, to communicate that. And one of the things, Barry, that I've learned from you over the time that we've known each other is, and I've been impressed by, is your reinvention. Like, I've found you've had this real inspiring kind of desire to learn and continue to learn. And I'd love to discover a little bit more related to that. Where does that come from in terms of the reinvention and interest in the newest, because you're into the newest tools, the technology, you're experimenting?
Yeah, Paddy, it's an interesting question, and one that's really easy to answer, that I've always had an inquisitive mind. And as someone said, a brain is a great thing to waste. Why would you waste a brain when it's such an extraordinary organ of the body and has a dimension that perhaps we don't even know about? Pilots required in the UK, and pretty well every other ICAO contracting states. ICAO is the International Civil Aviation Organization. So they're required to stop flying passengers at 65. And I hit that in 2022. It seemed a real pity just to then go, well, I'm stopped now, when in fact I hadn't. I still felt that I had at least another run round the boys left in me, as in the sailing boys, and the desire to carry on and impart knowledge and learn, reading 20 books a year or more. I know there are people who read 10 times that much, but I don't know how. And to do something constructive, and to be able to consolidate the knowledge that I had acquired up until that point, build upon it, and work with other people who who are similarly minded. And that's how the Sixsess Consultancy came about. Sixsess is about 6 S's, it's not a play on words as in success, it's 6 S's. And that was based upon our observation during some very significant negotiations that great companies have basically 6 things that all start with S. They're simple, straightforward, as in ethical, transparent, satisfying. Got to be. Why would you do something you don't want to do? You've got to be sustainable, and that means it has to be sustained in the environmental sense, but also economically sustainable, sellable, and that has to be sellable to not only the stakeholders, but also the potential investors and obviously the employees themselves. And so we've got essentially a concept there that the scalability of an organization is dependent upon a lot of very fundamental things. And so we set out to build strategic partnerships, which, as you know, is something that has worked very well. And so we've got some outstanding strategic partners who allow us to provide capability that I don't have, things that aren't in my particular bailiwick in terms of knowledge and understanding. And so we've brought those together, people who are digital marketing, people, professional strategists, authors of fantastic books on strategy, interim directors. We've got people who've been VPs of major airline flight operations departments. We've got people who've done huge amount of training in terms of training and consultancy in terms of target operating model and strategy. And it's gradually expanding. It's a significant cadre of really top professionals. And it's all about the same thing that I learned in the airline industry. And that is that whilst you may sit at the front of an airplane, what puts you there and keeps you there is the whole team of people who have got the capabilities that you just don't have. And so having a team who are excellent in every sense of the word, world class, to do that means that really you're able to provide something that otherwise you wouldn't. And that was the same in the airline industry, flying an airplane and flying passengers around the world, as it is in running an organization. That, what do they say? You should be the least brainy person in the room. Yeah, and clearly I am. So.
Brilliant. Yeah, like the refiring, I think, is what I thought of when you said that you're retiring, because you decided, okay, there's going to be more, and setting up Sixsess and the collaborations and the strong partnerships you've built with others, and the strengths they have. What was it that led you to change, like specifically, like as an area of focus? Because I understand that you're Cotter certified in change methodology, and what was it about that drew you towards it?
Yeah, that's interesting. We did a really very substantial negotiation back in the early 2000s, and it was very substantial. And we set about doing something that basically that exceeded that had been done within the preceding 20 years within the industry and the succeeding 20 years in the industry. And what we did there was we created this sense of urgency that something needed to be done. We then got a small group of people to guide it. And then we created a strategic vision, which was really important. But what was really game changing was that everybody got involved. We went round, we got in a Ford Transit. It wasn't necessarily Ford, by the way, for the sake of advertising standards. But it was a Ford Transit. And we traveled around all of the bases, met people, encouraged them to not only participate as members, but join as members, but also to give us the ideas, give us the support, give us the intuition, give us the innovations. And they were just fantastic. So we really were representative of the whole. There was this a huge amount of communication. For the first time, there was a website. I mean, it was extraordinary at the time. There was a website you could talk to each other via a website. It's called a bulletin board. You may have heard of one. And so we did all this, and this communication was going backwards and forwards. The negotiations lasted 15 months. Now, the interesting thing here is that we just kept the pedal to the metal. We kept the communications going. So we maintained that acceleration. We actually got if you like, the sort of the mothership union to remove barriers to us so that we could get this done. We celebrated the small things we achieved, And then we just kept the acceleration. And then finally, we rewrote the scheduling agreement to ensure that what we had achieved, which was a major reset and very substantial in terms of implication, was enshrined and embodied in a new working arrangement, a new scheduling agreement. And that basically lasted for 20 years. And when I had the opportunity to come across the work of Kotter and Dr. Kotter, it's exactly what the Kotter process is. And so it seemed just a logical kind of thing to do. So I got a Kotter Advanced Change Leader certified very, very early on in the process, and then built upon that. And we've built out our own program now, which is the People Change Leadership Framework. And again, it's because we want to keep the messaging simple. The reason it's called People is very simple. There are a number of processes which are people-centric leadership, really important. But if you think about the previous conversation we've had, people-centric leadership is everything to me. I mean, it's what we do. Then if you're thinking in terms of people-centric leadership, then you need to empower the people. And you'll have to help me here because I need to ensure that I get the spelling of this correct. So you need to empower people. And then you need to optimize your organization to ensure that it's fit for change, it's ready for change. There's no point in trying to create change if your organization has got systems that really are fundamentally not able to accept that change. And also you have obstacles to the change. So you need to optimize the organization. And one of the elements that we really do endorse is the concept of the hybrid organization structure, where you have the hierarchy that deals with the day-to-day routine stuff that needs to be reliable and dependable. And that kind of operates like a diesel engine, chugs along, and it's doing its thing, and it's making sure the organization is stable. But alongside that, you have an innovation node that consists of the people, the organization's people, right from bottom to top, from the front desk to the leadership team. And they have the responsibility for the innovation. So that's once you can optimize that they will voluntarily get involved. HMS, one of Kotter's great poster companies for their process, had 65% of their people in the volunteer network at any given time. So you need to optimize your organization. And then you need to have a purpose-driven vision. There's no point in having all of that if you haven't got something that has got almost like a higher purpose that people want. It's not just about profit. It's not just about the bottom line. It's about the stuff that really engages people's minds. And then as you proceed through that, because so now you've got your innovation network working on the purpose-driven vision, you need to learn. Is it actually working? It's kind of pointless. It's pointless if you don't have the learning as you go along, and you've got things like KPIs and OKRs, so key performance indicators, and objectives and key results, OKRs, and also talking about it and celebrating the wins is really important. And so the learning is really important. And then of course you've got to embed it. And when you take all of those elements, it spells people. And the idea behind it is that it's about people. And so if it does what it says on the tin, it's all about people. It's a process that enables people to maintain the focus on the key element of change, which is and are people.
And that is very the people model for change from an organizational level, leading people through change, some of the elements of success towards achieving cultural change or the desired change for that organization, if I understand correctly.
Yeah, but it's a great model for essentially any change. It doesn't matter whether it's a large or a small organization. Look, change is coming at us at a rate that's almost incomprehensible. And in fact, we've kind of reached the point, as I think Google said, where people's ability to adapt to change has been eclipsed by the rate of change. So organizations now have to get into shape to be able to leverage change on a daily basis. And that's why having an innovation network sitting alongside a hierarchy is so valuable, because you don't have people in the innovation network who've been there for 5 years because they will be burnt out. They will have had enough. You need to renew it. You need to keep the enthusiasm. It needs to be part of the organizational culture and muscle. And that will provide new ideas, new concepts, new energy. Ditto the what is clearly really very important is to have an executive sponsor who can actually make sure that their impediments to change are removed, and the support for the change through the sort of genesis of the change to its formulation and then execution has as few obstacles organizationally as is possible. And the buy-in from the leadership team is really important. To have a leadership team who are basically distanced from it, don't care about it, it's not going to work. You've got to have everybody on side, because change is about buy-in. Change is about ensuring that your stakeholders, including your key stakeholders, your internal stakeholders and your external stakeholders, actually can support it. You have Rogers' diffusion curve. If you don't have something like 75% of your organization on side, you've got a major uphill struggle. And for sure, if you've only got 50% or less on side, you really are pushing uphill. So it's about people. If we learn nothing else from this podcast, it is that change is about people. The key element of change is about people, which is why we've called the framework the people framework. And that is the idea behind that is that it focuses people's attention on people.
Yeah, no, it's very simple and easy to, I think, remember. And especially now with the pace and relentless nature of the changes that we're seeing, I think it's sometimes can be easily forgotten, the impact that it's having on those within the teams. So the people side of the change rather than the outcome.
Yeah, I would go as far as to say that the organizations that do put people first and put them right at the center of change are the ones who will excel in the 21st century. And you can look around at some of the really big names that appear on the NASDAQ who have done exactly that. Google have, as you know, for a long time empowered their people to go out and do a project. 15 or 20% of their time is spent on doing a project that is of interest to them. And if it fails, it fails. If it's not fit for market, they fail fast, fail cheaply. Eric Ries's concept, learn, build, measure, learn, pivot, is a great one. But you've got to have the people there who can bring the innovation, bring the energy, and bring the buy-in. And rather than go top down where you're trying to convince people and you're going through multiple layers of organization, if actually a significant proportion of your team and your people are involved, you've got most of it sorted. Remember, the domain of leaders is the future, and their principal responsibility is change. That's what it's about. So what's the asset of an organization? The answer is it's people.
It's fascinating, and the link with learning just made me think there how important it is to continue to learn, but now more than ever, it's also about unlearning, because what we have always been doing, the increase in different technologies, that two-letter word that everyone's talking about, beginning with A, how that's disrupting traditional structures as well, in terms of how businesses operate and how technology is part of that and where people fit and sit within it.
You don't have to go too far back, Paddy, to look at the disruptive technology. The sailing galleon was disruptive. The superpower at the time was the Netherlands, Holland, because they had the best shipbuilding capability and they dominated the world, and the guilder was the world's reserve currency. The next great power was the British, and they had the best technology at the time. And the real key underpinning element of that technological capability is education. It's back to people again. So AI, noted with interest. I use it every day. So do you. And I would imagine so does everybody who's going to be listening to this podcast. It is important that it remains the servant, not the master. And it's there as a tool. And there is the capability, if it's used incorrectly, that it starts to become a dominant, an inappropriately dominant element in terms of its effect on humanity. And so it's down to us to ensure that that doesn't happen. And that's going to be a big challenge, because at the moment it seems that the world is broadly incapable of agreeing on almost anything of substance without some kind of conflict erupting. And so we need to look at that. And so the element I think that we need to focus on is leadership. Very important. Education, ethics, and integrity are key drivers of a better society. And empathy is a significant part of that as well.
And what about, Barry, related to purpose-driven, like the purpose-driven vision for companies today, and for the future, like how do you see that playing a role?
I think Edward Freeman basically brought together the whole concept of stakeholders. And when he went to publish his article, the publishers went to correct it and said, well, we corrected your spelling mistake. It was from stakeholder back to shareholder. And in fact, it's about stakeholders. It's about the communities. It's about the planet we live on. It's about the communities we live in. It's about the people we converse with. It's the people we interact with, the stakeholders in our lives, the stakeholders in our organizations. And so if organization is only about profit, then only one group of stakeholders is actually, one very narrow focus group of stakeholders is actually being addressed, and that is the shareholders. And is that in the best interest? Who determines the context in which their returns are actually made? Is it quarterly? Is it annually? Is it over the long term? And I would argue that long-term stakeholder value is important. And whether it's a company, whether it's a country or an individual, it's the long-term value that's really important. This quarter is almost irrelevant in the grand scheme of things. And if we take a longer term perspective, my good friend Francis Wade at Framework Consulting goes out all the way to 25 years, as I think we've discussed before, with his retreats, and says, okay, what do you think it's going to look like? This company's going to look like, or this organization's going to look like in 25 years? And people initially are startled and go, what do you mean? We're only here to do a 1-year strategy. You go, yeah, but what's going to happen what's that strategy going to look like in 25 years time? And if you're now the person about to retire, and you're the 20-year-old at the other end of the room, and you were that person once, what would you have done differently now that would have made a big difference? And I think people need to ask themselves that. What should we be doing now that's going to make a long-term and positive difference to the stakeholders of planet Earth? And if we apply that not only to our sort of global environment, but also to our organizational environment, you move away from short-term profit focus to long-term sustainable value, sustainable profit, because profit is important to fuel research and the other great things. But if you say to an individual, I would like you to work harder or better or more cleverly for the profit of the organization, you'll switch them almost certainly right off, even if you offer an incentive. If you actually say to them, look, what we're going to do is going to benefit the community, is going to benefit the local community and other communities and the stakeholders within the communities in which we operate. The byproduct of all of that value to the stakeholders will be that we too will do well. It's a different proposition altogether. And so it's getting away from profit as a motive to something that is of a higher purpose, really, that gets people's imagination, emotion and interest engaged, and then everybody wins.
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely something that I've seen in terms of younger generations that want to work for a purpose-driven organization beyond what's been done. It's exactly like you said. It's what's the wider impact that we're having within our community or the local environment or ecosystem, or even wider than that. I think one company that comes to mind is Patagonia, where they shifted their entire business model, as far as I understand, towards a purpose of saving the home planet, and the types of people that attracts in terms of that purpose is fascinating, and the results are also in line in a very positive way. For the future, Barry, what are the key other trends that you see in terms of successful organizations with change, or things to keep in mind as well as their people?
Look, the triple bottom line is a concept that is, I think, well known but worth repeating. And that is that it goes something like people, profit, planet. I spin it around the other way. I go planet first, people, and then profit. So if you look after the planet, it's going to look after you. If you look after your people, it's going to look after you. And if all of that works, then the consequence of that is also bottom line profit. So it's the triple bottom line. If we go back to the airline environment, essentially you want to ensure that you've got all of the things that are really important in place, the basics. Know how to adapt to change, because it should be part of your daily activity. Think about the bigger picture, planet, people, profit. And at the end of the day, you'll be able to look back and go, actually, we did the right thing. And as Tim Miller said the other day, was that leadership is about doing the right thing. And there's never a wrong time to do the right thing. So keep it simple, keep the eye on the ball, and think about people, because they and all of the basics that underpin really outstanding companies will be the things that make your whole life a whole lot easier.
I love that summary. The focus on people-powered performance. Now more than ever, the benefits of engaging the people towards the change in a shared and aligned way.
It's about people. Simply put, it's about people.
Absolutely.
If you'd like to know more about the Sixsess Consultancy's People, Change, Leadership and Management Framework, please simply click on the QR code or in the link in the show notes below. And please do remember to like and subscribe the Just Great People podcast. Thank you. So that's it for today's Just Great People podcast from the Sixsess Consultancy. We hope and trust you've enjoyed it. Please join us next time, and please do remember to subscribe. Thanks for joining us.